Hi, I made a thing and I kind of want to show it to you because I think it's pretty cool. First things first though, this build requires corpses to function properly. I want to put this front and center because I don't want anyone to go out of their way to put this build together, run into a boss fight and be like, how do I do damage again? This build is really bad at bosses, and it's also pretty bad at delirium, because delirious mobs do not leave a corpse behind when you kill them. It can most definitely do delirium though, but you need to make sure that at first you avoid the mirror, you pull a pack of normal monsters, bring them to the mirror, and then run through it. If you don't do that, you're gonna run through the mirror, get swarmed, and die. So that's the bad side of the build. The single target is pretty bad. I've tried numerous things. I've tried using minions with sacrifice to use them as corpses, but that didn't work because the respawn timer is too long. I've even tried a freaking bow on my back bar and used the bow poison skills. That didn't work either. Even the chaos spells don't do good single target damage, which is downright baffling since we're mostly scaling chaos damage. So yeah, if you figure out a way to make this build do single target damage, do let us know in the comments, that'd be tremendous, thank you. So what is this build about? Well, it centers around the Corpse Weight unique boot. This triggers Decompose as you walk around. Now I'm not entirely certain how much the Decompose spell scales based on when you find the boots. I found them in maps, so they're level 60 something, and the Decompose was a level 16. Now, Decompose is an actual skill you get. Mine had 4 sockets, and what it does is it detonates corpses, which creates a gas cloud that poisons enemies for a massive amount of damage. As you can see at the moment, my Decompose is level 19 because you can actually scale the gem level, and the cloud poisons enemies as though doing 39% of the corpse's maximum life as damage. That's kind of insane. Detonate Dead, for example, in Path of Exile 2, deals damage equal to 20% of the corpse's maximum life. And that's in one big burst, not a cloud of poison that can stack multiple poisons, if you build it right. This results in some pretty hilarious damage, especially if you walk over a rare. Additionally, unlike with something like Detonate Dead, we can actually proliferate the damage outside of the gas cloud by simply carrying the poisons around via Contagion or Plague Herald. So while the single target might be atrocious at best, the clear is quite exquisite. Especially since the range at which you detonate corpses is enormous. Now the build is particularly good at rituals since the ritual area is quite small and the gas clouds are large, so after you kill a few things and you detonate a handful of corpses, anything that spawns will spawn into the gas cloud and immediately get poisoned for ridiculous amounts of damage. Plus, most of the time you need to kill enemies on top of the ritual to even activate it, so you have a gas cloud ready to go. There is no setup. It's also very fun in Breach, and it clears expeditions really well too. So let's go over the build so you can see how it works. Main damage skill is Decompose, we already talked about this, and into it we slot Comorbidity. This adds 1 extra poison stack onto the enemy and it lowers the poison duration, which doesn't matter. We have Bursting Plague, which also affects the enemies with Plague, which can then do a little Plague Burst for a bit of extra AoE damage. Next on the menu we have Deadly Poison. This is essentially a damage over time multiplier. The less damage with hits doesn't matter because we don't hit, and we top it all off with Magnified Effect for more AoE. Then we have a bunch of different buffs, starting off with Ghost Dance. This gives us energy shield back when we get hit based on our evasion, and into it we socket Fast Forward, which gives us Ghost Shrouds faster. We're also running Grim Feast, which allows us to pick up little remnants that enemies leave behind when they die, which recovers our energy shield, but also allows us to overcap our energy shield to twice its normal value. Then we're running 2 curses on a Blasphemy, which is really nice because curses are kind of annoying to deal with and they're also very mana hungry. This turns them into an aura around us, and we're running Despair for negative chaos resistance and Temporal Chains to slow the enemies down. This also increases the duration of our poison. Then we get to one of the reasons why we're actually an intelligence dexterity hybrid, Plague Bearer. This stores a percentage, 4%, of expected poison damage and allows you to release it as a Plague Nova. Now the Plague Nova actually does a good amount of damage. At this level, which is level 18 in my case, it stores up to 8,323 damage, which is dealt as physical damage with a guaranteed poison in a massive area. The next skill, or buff, is optional and can be replaced with Contagion, which is actually a lot better. However, Herald of Plague makes the build feel a lot more automated, as it spreads your strongest poisons on enemies you kill in a small area. If you don't have the spare spirit and or you don't mind adding an extra button to the build, run Contagion instead. It is better than this. Then we move on to some actual damage skills. The main skill we're using is Hex Blast. We use this to detonate curses from our blasphemy on the first few enemies so that we can have a few corpses to walk over to trigger Decompose. This does a pretty decent amount of damage if you have a handful of enemies grouped up, as it detonates the curses in an area. It is unfortunately fairly weak on single target. Into this we slot in Venom to give it a decent enough poison chance, as well as Considered Casting for less cast speed but more damage, Chaos Mastery to give it a +1 level, and Extraction to give it more damage, and the downside here doesn't actually matter because we're running Chaos Inoculation, so we don't have any life. And the final skill we have here is Dark Effigy. This is a little totem that shoots projectiles at enemies affected by damage over time. In this we slot Arcane Tempo, Ancestral Urgency so we summon a little bit faster, Withering Touch so that it applies to Wither, and finally Persistence so that the totem lasts longer. The gear is pretty straightforward. The most important thing is gonna be your weapons. You want to get a wand with ideally some chaos damage or damage as extra chaos damage, and then plus level of chaos skill gems. Now for your offhand, you ideally want a scepter with high amount of spirit and optionally some minion gem levels because of Grim Feast. One important thing here is that you want to have a high energy shield helmet, and you ideally want a high evasion energy shield body armor. Everything else is just resistance as well as stats, because this build needs roughly about 200-ish intelligence, about 170-ish dexterity, and roughly about 50 or 60 strength. Which is a lot of bloody stats to fit in, but it is definitely doable even in solo self-found because, well, I'm in solo self-found and look at me, I have the stats. So you can do it. Now for the Ascendancy, if you're going CI and you plan on staying CI, I would actually go Gemling Legionnaire because the Infernalist only has 2 nodes that do anything, and one of them just fixes your mana issues, which aren't that bad. Though I suppose you could round the Hound. However, if you're gonna do that, make sure you prevent it from igniting, otherwise it's gonna blow up your gas clouds and you'll be very sad. The cool thing about Infernalist is that if you manage to cap your Chaos Rest, you can go Baydat's Hand eventually, as well as Baydat's Will, and get a bunch of extra spirit and energy shield. The tree starts off pretty sensible. We just pick up a bunch of intelligence, some energy shield, some chaos stuff. We go for double curse as well as ingenuity for a bunch of extra intelligence. But as we start pathing to the right, you will see we start picking up dexterity. It's also where we transition more into evasion and poison based nodes. This poison wheel is really good, gives us tons of duration and +1 poison, though we still pick up some chaos nodes like this one because it gives us +1 levels. To make gearing easier, we also pick up some flat dexterity as well as percent dexterity on top of some additional evasion rating from energy shield on our helmet, and we're pathing towards more and more stuff like low tolerance to do more poison damage. You'll probably have to play around with the attributes a little bit to get everything dialed in, but it should be doable even in solo self-found. I think the build is pretty cool overall. It's a shame that it doesn't do good single target damage yet. I think there is a way to make it do single target damage. It's just gonna require a little bit more faffing around. I think the key to good single target is going to be running a strongbow on the back bar with a strong poison based skill and possibly a weapon specific secondary tree that sacrifices maybe a little bit of defense for more poison damage. The only problematic thing is that bows tend to require a lot of dexterity, so it might require a little bit too much gear for my solo self-found shenanigans. But anyway, that's pretty much it for the setup, so I thank you very much for watching, as always guys, and I hope you've enjoyed the video. Then I would also like to extend a special thank you to all the channel members. Thank you very much guys, I really appreciate your support, it means a lot to me, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.